Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 2023 FallDocs screening. My name is Armando Zamudio, and I'm the Public Programs and Events Coordinator here at IDA. For our blind and low vision attendees, I'm going to describe myself. I am a light-skinned Mexican-American wearing a white hoodie with a black jacket. I have messy hair, and I am sitting under a bookshelf. Thank you to our media sponsors, KCRW and Variety, for sponsoring our 2023 FallDocs. This evening, we'll have a conversation between filmmaker and film curator Natalie G, co-director Michéle Stephenson, co-director Joe Brewster, whose film Black Girls Play The Story of Hand Games premiered at Tribeca 2023. To see more amazing films like this, please visit www.documentary.org. Sorry, I couldn't hold it in. I don't know. I think it's because I was saying www.
First of all,
it's Emma that's making me laugh. It's Emma.
Emma?
Emma. We're all mad. We're like, stop. Okay.
We're not mad. Don't tell her we're mad.
Also, did I say her last name right? Is it Stevenson?
You did say it right, but you said WW, and it's www.
Got it. Okay. I'm sorry.
So
okay.
You need to just go back to see more amazing films like this.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Ready?
Of course I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yes. I'm ready. To see more amazing films like this, please visit www.documentary.org/FallDocs. Now, before we get started, I would like to offer a brief land acknowledgement. We recognize the Gabrielino Tongva as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land, water, and cultural resources in the unceded territory of Los Angeles. Thank you so much to Andrea Lust for ASL interpreting this discussion. And with that, I will pass it on to Natalie. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this Q&A for Black Girls Play. My name is Natalie Gee. I'm your moderator today. I'm wearing a white and blue plaid shirt. I have glasses. I'm white with blonde hair, and I'm sitting behind a large bookcase. And I want to introduce our co-directors, first Joe Brewster and also Michéle Stevenson.
Hey, I'm Joe Brewster. I'm co-director of Black Girls Play. I am sitting in a hotel room and the background is blurred. I'm a black male with a an attractive black male with gray hair, if you could call that hair, and a short gray beard. I'm wearing a black shirt with a collar.
Hi, and I am Michéle Stephenson. I am co-director of Black Girls Play, The Story of Hand Games. I am a light-skinned Black Latina, and I have curly brown hair that is short, and I am wearing sort of a multicolored shirt with some pink lace on the shoulders, and I am in a room that is a 16th century structure, hotel room with a painting of many red flowers in the background and a brown door behind me.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both of you for your time today. When I was preparing for this Q&A, I came across the book, The Games Black Girls Play, Learning the Ropes from Double Dutch to Hip Hop by Kiara D. Gond. And obviously Kiara is featured in the movie. And I was wondering if the book inspired the film or whether you came across her and her work while you were doing research for the film.
Actually, the book inspired the film. We were in conversation with Adam Newhouse, who at the time was head of development at ESPN. We had been in conversation for a number of years trying to figure out what is a good project that we could collaborate on. Right. And he brought this book to our attention and we loved it. And she's got a couple of short TED Talks also that are very inspiring. Yeah. And we felt that this was a point of view that really needed greater exposure as well. Joe, you want to add anything to that?
No, only that we had been in conversations with Adam for a couple of years, looking for a project. Finally, we told Adam, you know what we like. You've seen our work. We didn't have the time to come up with anything. And he came back immediately with this. And one thing is clear. He knows what we like. And this is an opportunity to talk about something that's, you know, almost a secret. It's a hidden truth. Right. But it's also inspirational in terms of the contribution these girls have really made to popular American culture.
Yeah, definitely. And I was curious if you played hand games or jump ropes as kids yourselves, and then did that inform the way you responded and crafted the material in the film, or was this kind of a new topic for you?
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the girls in the historical footage that was we inserted from Los Angeles is my cousin.
Really?
And like I'm like so shocked. But what I can say is that it was a rite of passage. It's something that occurred on a daily basis, particularly in the summers. The girls would play all day long and we would play in the background. We would try to join in and we were just never good enough.
Yeah. Oh.
No, I was saying Double Dutch was a tough one for me. Never quite got the hang of it, but hand games was definitely part of my youth.
Yeah. Well, we learned that there's like these 3 reasons why the games may seem insignificant. You know, they're performed by children, they really a girl's experience, and the music is not a part of our public domain. Do you think there's a way that this tradition can become more significant, or Joe, maybe, as you mentioned, like more known? And is there a way that either parents or teachers or artists can kind of foster this?
Well, I think the first step is awareness.
Yeah.
People aren't aware of the importance of these games and how entwined they are with every form of popular culture. The interesting thing is these games come from Africa, and it's more than a game. It's a culture. It's a way of communicating. It's a way of teaching and learning. So the rhythms, the call and response, the danceability, and the ability to play the game and include other people in the innovative part of the game is part of a tradition going back thousands of years.
Right.
Yeah, I do think so. There's this it's a fine line in terms of what you're talking about in terms of recognition, because it has sustained for centuries, right? And it continues to develop and form new ways of being and communicating, even with technology. If you look at TikTok, which we include in our conversation, it includes innovation in dance and hand game communications that young Black women hold and innovate and lead. The question is about the appropriation of it. And we see it happening in TikTok, right? And there have been controversies around that. So, and we will continue to innovate because that's what we do. That is part of being human. So once it's appropriated on TikTok, they'll find other forms and it will continue because it's part of what sustains us. So it's really about the lens, right? Young women, even when I showed this to some of the friends who are, some of the young women who are friends of my sons, it brought back memories for them as well. And this idea of communicating, and Jamila talks about it as well.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say it's a secret society, but there's a way that it continues, whether the lens of recognition is on it or not. And I think that's what we're trying to highlight. Like, this is something that has been sustained from Middle Passage on, but not just it's sustained. There's an idea, I think, when we talk of the Black Atlantic, this experience of violence that has happened through slavery, colonialism, and genocide in some cases, where we preserve our humanity through these cultural innovations and create something new. Yes, it has its roots in Africa, but there's something specifically here that is about the lived experience that sustains us. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think the bigger question is, how do we not let it be appropriated and make it recognized, and recognize, who are the holders of this flame?
Right, absolutely.
But let me just make one point, because appropriation is a natural thing, and so the question is, who gets credit for these innovations? The people in power, the people who get credit for hip hop innovations are guys, and that hasn't changed. The people with less power get less credit, and this is the American way of life.
But it's a parallel thing. We continue to resist. We continue to create culture. It's about what is that relationship with those who have more power, and in terms of how that is reflected. So that won't stop, because it's a necessity out of being human.
Yeah, and with that also, the film talks about how sometimes the tradition is lost as women grow older. Can you talk a little bit about that? There's a really interesting parallel to how men still continue to play games as they grow older, but that's not the same for women.
Well, Michéle, I'm giving that to you. You played these games as a child, and do you still play the games? And is that your experience the same?
Well, I mean, I think Kira speaks to it, right? In terms of when we look at how we validate. I mean, we can even turn to sports, right? Because young women have played sports as well. I played many sports, growing up, including the hand games as well. But it's not recognized once we become adults, right? Women are still fighting for equal pay or audience in that kind of sense in the sports arena. And it's no different with these sort of games that we talk about as ways that, of expressions of joy, right? So we're there's pushback against letting us express joy through our sisterhood, right? And so I think there are initiatives where older women are taking up the rope again or playing hand games, but also the full movement towards sports equity in this field is changing.
Well, I think one thing that I'm treading on dangerous territory now. One thing is that women have traditionally left their games to be caretakers, and so
Right.
so the game become less important. But if you look at the caretaking, the caretaking, the mothering, the grandmothering, the cooking, the cleaning, it all incorporates these pillars of this cultural style. I'm talking about singing, humming, dancing. It's not just dancing. It's inspiring the people you are caretaking. It's the music, and it is the way that you cope with daily trauma. There's got to be joy throughout the day. And these pillars of this culture are being used, but they're not seen as play. But unfortunately, they're not as seen as
Right.
they're essential. These are essential tools to get through our day.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of a really powerful moment in the film is when Jamila Woods performs her monologue on stage. I mean, it's interesting how she talks about the farm and how she's using it in a different way and commenting on politics today. And what I just was curious what it meant for you to be able to include that scene of her performance in the movie.
Well, for me, we felt it was crucial. Once we had heard it, it was crucial. But I do want to go back to this idea of using the form. She's continuing a tradition, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, not all of our interviews were able to come into the piece, but our interviewee, who's from Knoxville, Tennessee, we have a little scene there where she talks about her own lived experience of dehumanization and discrimination and turning the hand games as a child, right, into an expression and affirmation of her humanity in reaction to that abusive situation that occurred on the bus.
On the bus, right.
And so Jamila is part of that extension of that tradition. And she, this professor also talks about sometimes these hand games, they change to reflect the moment. There are a couple that actually talk about pregnancy and abortion that were not in the film. There are others that we mentioned very briefly that are about the border and migrants. I don't want to go, I don't remember all of it's escaping me now. I don't want to go to Mexico because they're killing people and they make a rhyme out of it. So what I'm saying is that Jamila is continuing a tradition on stage with the form that is about reinterpreting our lived experiences, affirming us as humans, and doing it in this rhythmic communication that is part of this African expression.
So what we haven't made clear is that we talk about these games, but we use 3 different kinds of musical culture and representatives of each of those cultures to illustrate our points. We use a hip-hop artist. Her name is Jamila Woods out of Chicago. We use a gospel choir out of Knoxville, Tennessee. And we work with one of, I think, the world's best flautists, most accomplished, Elena Penderhughes. And each of them discuss their lived experience and how these games morphed into their current practice. But I also think we work with young girls in Brooklyn and in Tennessee to demonstrate how they are using these games on a daily basis. So I think the audience gets history but they get a practical discussion from the
Mm.
users of these musical practices and how they got where they are today. Is that clear? I'm trying to describe the piece with a little more intention. Michéle?
No, I think, yeah, that totally, that's it. I mean, I think the only thing I would add has to do with the rhyming, which I mentioned a little bit. The rhyming, that, you know, has a direct relationship to rap and hip hop, and that is also about chronicling our lived experiences in this oral tradition. That is just as important as somebody who sits down and writes a poem in some ways.
Right.
Because there's that immediacy of the present that you know, that gives us a sense of self, and anyway, it resonates emotionally.
Mm. And it seems that a lot of this is performed like in the playground and on the streets. And I was wondering, does it also, is it taught in music classes at all in schools? Or is it something that's not really in school systems at all? It's more of a community expression in maybe the playgrounds or at home.
I wouldn't know if it's taught in primary schools uniformly around the country. I do know that the work of Kerrigan and other ethnomusicologists is being lifted up nationally, and that she teaches it, and so does Marveline, the ethnomusicologist in Knoxville, Tennessee. I think more of this is coming to light, not only here, but internationally. These games are just as prevalent in other places where people of African descent landed. So there's Paul Gilroy, who's discussing it in London City in the United Kingdom. There's Brazil, there's Cuba, there's Haiti. These games are ubiquitous because it's an expression of a musical culture, which I'm being redundant, which has been around a long time. And I think the important part that Michéle mentioned is that it's not just rhythm and feeling good about your movement.
Right.
It's a historical, it's a way of communicating story. Right. It starts with girls, but if you look at the other forms it morphs into, these are stories of joy and inspiration. It is a historical, not explanation is not the right word. It's a historical view of the culture.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to you know, make a blanket statement about whether it's in schools or not. I think it depends where. There are two things. One, Elena does speak to the tradition of how she learned music through a particular professor in Oakland who taught the call and response and understanding the body and rhythm before they even picked up an instrument, and that has the roots in hand games. And they use the hand game communication to better understand musicality. But the other important thing to understand, which is why this has survived for so long, is this idea of it being transferred from generation to generation. Mothers, aunts, cousins showing younger people. Elena speaks to that. Jamila speaks to that, about it being handed down in what we call the informal, sometimes less validated sort of, it's not an institutional in that way, but it has happened. And we show in the archival footage as well, this elder woman who talks about how she learned it and how she handed it down. And this has continued, you know, for generations. So the question is, how do you not lose that intergenerational passing it on, with how technology has come in and sort of changed how we communicate?
Mm.
The interesting thing for us is how do we tell this story, right? Which is historical in nature. We need a lived experience, a character, but we also try to use editing in a rhythmic way
Mm.
that helps demonstrate these principles. Uh, and we've been experimenting, and it's part of our process in almost everything we do. And I think the musical style or editing montage style that we developed for this helped us with our most recent feature film, Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni project. So we're taking these principles, which we think are inspirational,
Mhm.
we've been around for centuries, and we're using to tell stories visually. So
Mhm.
if you look at the piece, there'll be call and response from the
Right.
characters. If you look at the piece, you'll see the polyrhythms, and you certainly want to dance. We've been to screenings where in Martha's Vineyard and others where and in Philadelphia,
In
where the
In
audience
Philly.
began to sing with the piece.
That's awesome.
That's something we never anticipated, but we should have.
Right. Mm. Yeah, it makes you want to move for
Yeah,
sure.
and there's call and response between the film and the audience. So there's a communication.
Right, right. Can you talk a little bit about the process of researching and finding the archival footage? And Joe, you mentioned that one of your cousins is in that. Could you just share a little bit about what that process was like?
Uh, I I'm going to say that we have the most amazing archivist in the world, and I'm reluctant to give her name because everyone's trying to hire her now. But her name is Hannah Shepard. She lives upstate New York, uh, and she had access to these incredible archives that my cousin was in. Uh,
Wow.
and this is footage that really hasn't been, it's been seen but not appreciated, and it
Mm,
was
mm,
picture perfect for us. But Michéle process, what we did is
Well,
uh
I mean, in addition to Hannah, we wanted to make sure as well that this was a diasporic
mm,
story that was not limited to the United States.
right.
And we worked with an editor based out of Mexico City, Clementina Martellini, who she loves to dig through YouTube. And so she found some amazing hand game stuff from Liberia, from Dominican Republic, from Brazil. And in some cases were the exact same games with a little twist, you know? And we made sure to include those so people could see the connections that kind
Mm,
of defied, you know, the existence of the borders between us. Because we like to say that the Black Atlantic lived experience defies borders. What we do here in the United States is reflected in the Caribbean of Mexico or in Brazil.
mm.
There are modes of being that we see each other with, and we were really intent on that. And Clementina, who's originally from Venezuela, also saw some of these connections.
Wow. Yeah, it's also fascinating to see it just change and develop into popular music and hip hop. And like you mentioned before, on TikTok, and how the influences and how it's all been changing. I also was just curious how you both work together as co-directors and how you find the heart of the story, just being a co-directing team.
well, I've been answering that question a lot lately,
Oh.
and been getting a lot of laughs. But I'm gonna give this to Michéle. How do we work together?
Well,
Uh,
I
as
want to
long
hear
as
where
you
you've been
win.
getting those laughs, because I don't think I've been in those conversations. I want to
Well,
hear that.
what I've been saying is that you're not easy to work with, but neither am I. And so what we do is a lot of horse trading. It's a lot of compromise, and we have strengths.
Mm.
And so we stay in our silos, uh, uh, and try to develop as much as we can before we present to each other, because it's a process. I also think we have a strong team. It's a small team, but it's
Wow.
pretty democratic, so that we are listening to
Mm.
sound, we're listening to picture, we're talking about directly with the cinematographer, how can we make this more vibrant? And the editing process is pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, yeah. I like to say that our collaboration is very fluid. In some ways, I think even unconsciously, it reflects some of these pillars. Like sometimes Joe takes the stage and we let that happen, and then we have a call and response and conversation, and then we figure out collectively what makes sense. So I think that creative innovation for us, it's very fluid. But I do think for me, the one nugget about it is a level of transparency and honesty in the communication that comes from a deep place of respect, right? And that is so important in any collaboration that we are involved in, whether it's the two of us or with the larger team. That's how I think collaborative creativity really is able to thrive, right?
Yeah.
Where there is no feeling of fear if I express something, around this creative process,
But
that
Yeah.
it's
but that's very
personal. So we try to
interesting.
work on that.
Very interesting, because I didn't get that before. So one of these principles is individuality within the collectivity, within the collective. So that means that in the circle of play, someone is pushed to the center of the circle, and they're allowed to innovate, and that innovation inspires other people. That person is removed from the circle in the game of play, and someone else enters. I remember those
Right.
growing up, where we would go in and you would do your little thing in the middle of the circle, which wasn't very good, but it always got better by the time you finished, because you got multiple chances. Well, that is exactly what's happening in our process of making a film. So innovation is important. So we encourage each other to take huge risks. And in fact, we have an amazing editor we work with in Maryland, Silver Springs, and we brought him in to innovate. He innovated. We saw it. It was out there, and we would put him in the side of the circle, and then we would work on it some more, and he would get back in and innovate more. He even worked with the other editors in that process, and they began to communicate. So the process of, there are a lot of cuts here, and there are a lot of rhythmic cuts, is part of that individuality within the collective. What is that? What's the proper term, Michéle?
Yeah, individuality within the collectivity. I think that's what we try to practice in our process, both between the two of us, but also with the larger team.
Well, if I can ask one last question, I know we're kind of at the end of our time. I just wanted to end on what has stayed with you the most about making this film, or what has inspired you the most from having completed this project?
Well, I'm going to go first. I realize the work. My father's a preacher, and I'm not particularly religious, but what I noted now is what was going on in church in that community was the same thing we're talking about. There was an oral history. There was individually with the collective. There was polyrhythms and inspirational music. And so I've learned to appreciate my culture even more and embrace that with my kids who basically have grown up in Brooklyn and are not aware as of consciously aware of these traditions in their life. So hopefully other people will be inspired by this film.
I want to say that I think that for me, what feels really exciting is the fact that ESPN has is willing to take this risk of reimagining and redefining what play looks like, centering the experiences of Black women. And I'm very excited about what that could mean, largely because our stories, independent storytelling and filmmaking is really at a crossroads right now in terms of what is supported and how our expressions are supported, both with features and shorts and all of it. And what we don't want is the same old, right? And ESPN, I think, in some ways is forging other ways of us seeing things. And I'm very grateful that they've been willing to take the risk and move in that direction. And I hope they continue to do that because there's an audience out there for that. And it is very important right now in this battle of narratives that we are in on a national level. In terms of whose narratives get told and how our history is told, how our lived experiences are told, is really important. So it is important that those who are taking the risk, who have the possibility of make these bold statements with something like Black Girls Play.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. This has been wonderful, and thank you for sharing the film with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
One last thing. You can see why I married her.
Absolutely. What a great team.